One day, while a man was in the barracks reading his Bible, a fellow soldier burst in with an urgent message. He was informed that something terrible had occurred at his home, but he was unaware of how severe the situation was. He was then taken back home, where he discovered that his family had been caught in a fire at their house, and sadly, none had survived. Investigations revealed unusual circumstances surrounding the fire, showing that none of the victims had died from smoke or the fire itself, but instead, each family member had stab wounds, indicating that this was not an accident, but a case of murder. The question was, who could have committed such a crime in such a quiet and peaceful neighborhood? This is the chilling case of the Milkin family. In 1989, Pavel Milkin relocated his family from Estonia to the United States. Originally of Russian descent, they had lived in Ukraine before moving to Estonia. They moved there with the hope of improving their lives and opportunities, and luckily enough, they got a sponsor in Everett, Washington. Pavel quickly found work as a welder and secured an apartment for his family before eventually settling in a home in Mill Creek. He recalled that upon their arrival in the US, he spoke no English but was struck by the warmth of the Americans. His son, Leonid Milkin, born on September 6, 1976, was a teenager at the time, and it wasn't long before he started to build his own American dream with a family of his own. Leonid eventually met Olga, and from the moment they crossed paths, he was drawn to her caring nature. He quickly realized he was in love and wanted her to be his wife. While Olga was outgoing and made sure everyone felt included, Leonid was more quiet and reserved. The couple married on January 24, 1998, when he was 21 and she was 20. Born on July 21, 1977, in Russia, Olga was one of 5 daughters born to her mother, Lyubov Botvina. Her family's journey was similar to the Milkins. Both families were of Russian descent and had emigrated to the United States. Olga's mother worked as a fiscal specialist at the University of Washington. Lyubov lovingly raised her daughters, devoting all her time to them. Olga was close with all her sisters, particularly Lyubov, who was known as Luba to differentiate from their mother. Luba was born on November 26, 1981, and like Olga, she was a devout Christian, actively involved in her church, Christian Faith Center. She was pursuing studies at Seattle Pacific University to become a translator for a hospital and was highly committed to her education. Though she lived in Seattle, she often spent her free time at her sister's home in Kirkland. Luba was known for her sweetness, generosity, and the inspiration she brought to both friends and family. Leonid's parents loved Olga and her sisters as if they were their own. The Botvinas and Milkins were like one big, happy family, embracing each other warmly. The two families frequently gathered for dinners and shared in life's joys, including the births of Olga and Leonid's 2 sons, Justin and Andrew. Justin Daniel Milkin, born on August 29, 2000, was described as a curious and lively child, inheriting Olga's creativity. Andrew Benjamin Milkin was born on August 21, 2002, and he looked up to his older brother, wanting to be just like Justin. Andrew was thoughtful but strong-willed. Both boys were described as sweet and joyful. After the birth of his second son, Leonid joined the Washington National Guard in November 2002. He was stationed at the Tacoma Armory and served with Alpha Company, 341st Military Intelligence Battalion. His family took great pride in his service, with his sons often saluting him and wearing his uniforms around the house. On the other hand, Olga worked as a dental assistant in Bellevue. In 2003, Leonid and Olga purchased their first home in Kirkland, Washington, fulfilling a long-held dream. The house, built in 1914, required some renovations, but the couple eagerly planned to remodel it together. However, in September 2005, Leonid, who worked in military intelligence, volunteered for deployment to Iraq, where his skills were in high demand. It was a difficult decision for the family, but they believed it was a worthwhile sacrifice. Both Olga and Leonid committed to staying strong during his absence, speaking daily whenever they could connect as they held on to hope and made plans for their future once he returned home. Neighbors described Olga as incredibly strong. Even with Leonid away, she remained upbeat and was always in good spirits. Both Olga and Leonid's families provided support, with Luba moving in for the summer to help out. A few months after Leonid's departure, Olga decided to leave her job at the dental office to focus entirely on her sons. She had always wanted to be a full-time mother, and now spent her days engaging in activities with the boys and closely monitoring their education. She held phone conferences with Justin's teacher twice a week to ensure he was not only excelling academically, but also socializing well with his classmates. Olga and the children attended 2 church services each week, starting with the American church in the morning and the Russian church in the evening. Like the rest of her family, she was deeply committed to her faith and also made sure her sons followed her footsteps as well. On July 17, 2006, Leonid was in the barracks reading his Bible when a fellow soldier rushed in, informing him of an urgent message from the Red Cross. But before we dive further into this story, here's a word from today's video sponsor, Aura. I want to talk about something that's really annoying and has been for a long time, and I'm sure many of you can relate to, and that is spam emails. So first off, let's start with when spam emails really start to pile up. One of the biggest times for this is during the holiday season. Think Black Friday, Easter, or even the lead up to Christmas. Spammers know everyone's in shopping mode, and they take full advantage of that. Now, during these peak periods, you can easily get bombarded with 20, 30, even 40 spam emails a day. And they're not just your typical, congratulations, you've won type of spam. Oh no, they've gotten way more sophisticated. The design, the language, even the links at times seem legit, and it's scary how convincing these can be. Some emails look exactly like they've come from a major retailer, offering huge discounts on products you might actually be interested in. But once you pay, that's when you realize you've been scammed. These spam emails can also affect your daily routine, as they are a huge productivity killer. Instead of focusing on work or just enjoying your day, you're stuck sifting through a mountain of junk, trying to make sure you don't miss anything important. And if you're not careful, if you accidentally click on one of these links, you could be in big trouble. You might end up with malware on your computer, or worse, your personal information could get stolen. And I know one of the other major reasons we get so many spam emails is because big companies can't keep our data safe. Recently, AT&T revealed that nearly all their customers' call and text records had been exposed in a massive data breach. The stolen logs also contain a record of every number AT&T customers called or texted. So even if you don't use AT&T, if someone who texted you did, then your number has been exposed. So what can we do to protect ourselves? That's where Aura, the sponsor of today's video, comes in. Aura will alert me if they find my email address or any other sensitive information has been compromised, and they give me fast fraud alerts if anyone tries to use that data to access my credit or bank accounts. Aura does so much more to keep me and my family safe too. I also get things like transaction monitoring, a VPN, antivirus, a password manager, parental controls, and identity theft insurance. I get this all in one app at one affordable price. I can even get their AI-powered call assistant that will pick up unknown calls on my behalf to screen them for spam or scams. The AI forwards legitimate calls to me, so I don't miss appointments, deliveries, and emergencies. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/twisted truths or click the link down in the description and get your first 2 weeks for free. Thank you, Aura, for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the story. So Leonid was then led to the chaplain's office, where his firearm and extra ammunition were taken from him before he was informed of an accident. He knew something terrible had occurred, but couldn't fathom the extent of it. He was promptly flown back to the States. At 11:32 a.m., a fire was reported on the 9500 block of Slater Avenue by a neighbor. Firefighters took an hour to put out the flames, and another 4 hours before they could start their investigation. No emergency call had come from inside the house, and the fire appeared to have started randomly. Once the scene was stable, investigators found 4 victims. In an upstairs bedroom were the bodies of Olga and Luba, and in the adjacent hallway were Justin and Andrew. Initially, it was believed they died from smoke inhalation, but the timing of the fire seemed suspicious. According to other family members, Olga and the children wouldn't have been asleep at that time, so they couldn't understand how they failed to escape the house, or at least call for help. It simply didn't make sense at all. The ATF, fire officials along with search dogs, were brought in to further investigate the cause of the fire. It was determined that the fire was intentionally set, with gasoline used as an accelerant at various points inside the home. After the bodies were removed, they were sent to the King County Coroner's Office for autopsies. The autopsies revealed that none of the victims died from smoke or fire-related injuries. Each had stab wounds to their upper bodies and heads, with the children also having wounds to their throats. This had become a murder case. As they sifted through the debris, Kirkland officials collected any potential evidence, including a set of bloody clothes, a hunting knife, a flashlight, and a partially burned glove. The police then began interviewing neighbors for any signs of suspicious activity. Around the time of the fire on July 18, 2006, these interviews led to 2 women who described seeing a man near the Milkins' home. The suspect was reportedly seen around the property with what looked like a container. He was described as a white male in his mid-20s with a distinctive green dragon tattoo on his left bicep. When given this description, another neighbor identified it as matching Connor Shearman, the newest resident in the area. Connor lived across the street from the Milkins in a duplex, having moved in just 2 weeks earlier, and had been unfriendly to neighbors who tried to introduce themselves, as they also reported that he mostly kept to himself. The police approached Connor at his residence and immediately noticed he matched the description precisely, including the tattoo, and had noticeable scratches on his face and a puncture wound on his left forearm. When asked about the Milkins, Connor claimed he didn't know them. Further questioned about his wounds, he said he had stopped a fight at a nearby gas station earlier that day. After interviewing Connor, investigators were convinced he was their suspect and proceeded to the AM/PM convenience store to verify his alibi. The footage from the store showed no fight in the parking lot, but did capture Connor leaving with a red gas canister. On the morning of July 19th, Connor was arrested. Once in custody, he admitted to his involvement, but described his experience as waking from one nightmare into another. He explained that on July 16th, he drank 3 bottles of vodka late into the night and blacked out. When he came to the next morning, he found himself in the Milkins' master bedroom, covered in blood, surrounded by the 4 victims, with no memory of the previous night. He changed out of his bloody clothes, took a shower, and dressed in hospital scrubs he found before heading to the convenience store. At the AM/PM, he filled the red gas canister and then returned to the Milkin home, where he spread the accelerant around before setting the house on fire. Believing he had escaped detection, he went back home and went to bed. Connor insisted that he committed the arson under the mistaken belief that he had not killed the family. He thought that if he didn't destroy the evidence, the police wouldn't believe his story, and of course, they didn't. The blackout theory became a major point of debate, as investigators felt he had enough presence of mind to attempt a cover-up. Additionally, the wounds on his arms and face suggested a struggle had taken place. However, the motive was unclear. Nobody could figure out why Connor would target the Milkins. Friends and colleagues described him as passionate, well-mannered, and intelligent. Connor, who admitted to being an alcoholic and drug addict, was a patient at the Lakeside Milam Recovery Center. After completing his program, he moved to a halfway house before settling into the Kirkland duplex with a roommate. Program members said Connor was an ordinary individual. He worked at the Carillion Point business and hotel complex for about a year and a half, performing general maintenance without causing issues, and had no prior criminal record. During questioning, investigators searched Connor's residence and found a pair of running shoes with traces of blood and gasoline. The shoe treads also matched the footprints found at and near the Milkins' home. With his confession and evidence linking him to the scene, Connor was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. He remained in custody at the King County Jail until his arraignment on July 31, 2006. While waiting for the trial to progress, Leonid organized a memorial service with his extended family to honor their lost loved ones. On July 23, 2006, at City Church in Kirkland, nearly the entire community came together to pay their respects to the 4 victims. The church was filled to capacity, with mourners grappling with the incomprehensible tragedy. Leonid sought solace by relying on friends and family to help him through this devastating time. He noted that, while he had witnessed real violence in Iraq, he never expected such brutality to strike his own family. He anticipated this kind of violence from a war-torn country, but not from America. Connor appeared in court on July 31st, entering a plea of not guilty, with a bond set at $10 million. The state announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Shortly after his arraignment, Connor's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the murder charges following the accidental release of 300 pages of case files and evidence by the Kirkland Police Department to a local TV station. In the motion, his attorney argued that the release of the case files was a deliberate attempt by the media and police to try the case in the press before he had even entered a plea, but the motion was denied. It took over 3 years for the trial to commence due to the high-profile nature of the case. Jury selection began in November 2009, with questioning concluding several weeks later, setting the trial date for January 20th, 2010. The trial lasted 11 weeks, during which the prosecution presented DNA evidence. Connor's DNA was found in several locations inside the home, including on a pair of men's shorts and on the glove and knife. Olga's DNA was detected on the necklace Connor was wearing at the time of his arrest and on the soles of his recovered shoes. On March 16, 2010, the prosecution rested its case. The defense focused significantly on expert testimony from addiction specialist Dr. Sweeney, who testified that blackouts from heavy drinking were quite common. Typically, a blackout lasts no more than 6 hours, during which individuals can walk and talk, but cannot recall their actions. It was established that Connor had 4 times the legal limit of alcohol in his system. The defense rested on April 5, 2010, without Connor taking the stand. Closing arguments took place 3 days later, with the prosecution arguing that the murders were premeditated and aggravated, thus warranting the death penalty. They contended that voluntary intoxication causing a blackout did not constitute a valid legal defense. The defense did not dispute Connor's involvement, but argued that the evidence pointed to someone else as the killer, or that Connor's level of intoxication precluded the intent required for a first-degree aggravated murder conviction. The case concluded with the jury deliberating for 9 hours before delivering their verdict on April 12, 2010. The jury found Connor guilty of 4 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree arson. The penalty phase commenced on April 19, 2010. The prosecution called 4 members of the victims' families to testify, each describing their lives and the profound effect the deaths had on them. In contrast, the defense sought to humanize Connor, bringing in several character witnesses, including family, friends, and teachers who discussed his troubled upbringing. Connor had a history of childhood abuse that contributed to his addictions. During this phase, Connor took the stand and expressed regret to the victims' families, though he did not admit to the murders. Tearfully, he said, "I may not have the right to ask anything of you, but I'm asking for mercy. If not for me, then for those who love me." After 2 weeks of testimonies, the jury returned a special findings verdict on May 8, 2010, recommending the death penalty for Connor. On May 27, 2010, Connor was officially sentenced to death. At his sentencing, Connor again refused to apologize to the families and maintained his innocence, arguing that the death penalty would be an act of vengeance and not justice. Both Leonid and Olga's families were satisfied with the verdict, believing justice had been served. Following his sentencing, Connor was moved to the Washington State Penitentiary to await execution on death row. Right after the verdict was announced, Connor's attorney informed the court of plans to appeal to the Washington Supreme Court, citing issues with jury selection and prejudicial comments made by the prosecution. In 2014, a suspension of the death penalty in Washington was declared. However, this did not halt legal proceedings related to the death penalty that had begun before this declaration. On April 12, 2018, Connor's case was reviewed again, following the motion filed by his attorney, and the Washington Supreme Court upheld both his conviction and sentence. Nevertheless, 6 months later, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in a separate case that the Washington death penalty was unconstitutional. Consequently, Connor and 7 other death row inmates had their sentences commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Connor's defense team asserted that while Connor was a good person, he was convicted of a terrible crime, and they contended that the true events of July 17th remained unknown, and they firmly believed that Connor was never the perpetrator. After the trial concluded, Leonid was able to rebuild the family home with the support from his community, as many volunteers organized fundraisers and opened a bank account and even held garage sales. Leonid was deeply moved by the community's response. Initially surprised, he soon realized this was how a community comes together in times of tragedy. Those who participated in the effort believed that no one deserved such support more than he did. Leonid viewed his rebuilt home as a tribute to his family and felt it no longer reflected the site of the murders, but rather a memory of his beautiful and loving family. The devastating and heartbreaking events inflicted on the victims by this merciless perpetrator are deeply distressing. As we reflect on this horrific story, our hearts and minds are with those whose lives were tragically cut short and the grieving loved ones they left behind. If you found this video compelling, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and check out our other videos. Don't forget to also check out Aura using the link down in the description to get your first 2 weeks for free. Thank you for watching.